Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers, joined by my good friend and co-worker, the newest member of the On Texas Football family, Jeff Howe. And today we're talking about some of the, what I think are some of the deeper concepts that Texas is trying to explore on offense and defense. And mainly, we're going to start with multiplicity, position flex, versatility on both sides of the football. We heard from Sark early this week talking about spring practice, but I also thought he had a couple of hidden gems, some nuggets that I want to explore, talking about versatility, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and we'll get to that. But before we get started, I want to thank our fantastic sponsor for our football theory. Really appreciate Laura Baker and her team for being a part of our team here at Texas Football Theory, brought to you by accomplished Austin realtor Laura Baker. Laura and the Andy Allen team at Keller Williams can handle all of your real estate needs in the Austin area. Laura is not only a diehard Longhorn fan, but a longtime Austin real estate expert. Please give her a shout today, 512-784-0505. That's 512-784-0505. If you have any concerns, questions, or any issues regarding real estate in the Austin area, there's no better person to talk to than Laura Baker and her team. So thank you very much for being a part of our team here at On Texas Football and sponsoring the Football Theory, the sports show we have going on today. All right, Jeff, let's get down to it. Let's talk about it right now. I heard Sark bring this up talking about Trey Moore, and it was probably the number one thing that stood out to me about the media availability for Steve Sarkisian. Because he remarked that Trey Moore would be cross-training at 3 different positions. Mm-hmm. He also said that this was basically something that was being implemented to try to confuse opposing offenses on identifying where Trey Moore was going to be on the front. It's going to be an edge, it's going to be an outside linebacker. Where is he going to be utilized? And essentially that there were more than cross-training him. They were trying to find ways to almost weaponize him, which is what he described in the offense. And to me, that is one of the last phases of roster construction on the defensive side of the ball for Texas. I've always said this, Texas kind of have gone through phases defensively for PK. I wish I could sit down and have a discussion with him about this. But the first phase was, we got to stop the run. Basic principle of defense playing football, stop the run, number one. And then number 2 was, instead of trying to emphasize coverage, they emphasize pressure. Get pressure. All right, now that we can stop the run, let's get pressure to try to some way find a way to discombobulate the opposing quarterback and find a way for them to maximize pressure and convert splash plays, sacks. Mm-hmm. And they started to do that last year too, convert the pressure into splash plays. And I think one of the last 2 phases, which I think they are right now on the verge of, number 1, trying to create more man coverage, trying to emphasize and prioritize more man coverage, but also trying to cultivate multiplicity, trying to cultivate defenses that can be malleable depending on what the offense presents to them. And I think that's where we are now. And that's what the Trey Moore plan reminds me of, that Texas is trying right now to be a defense that can create and cultivate multiplicity and position flex to confuse opposing offenses. And that's kind of what I want to focus on today, because I think Trey Moore, and I didn't expect Trey Moore to be a focal point of it, but it seems like right now the coaching staff wants Trey Moore to be weaponized with the multiplicity on defense.
Yeah, I didn't think he'd be that guy either, Rod. Honestly, I mean, I figured it'd be Colin Simmons. I think
exactly.
I think the one thing it's going to do, I think it's going to help Trey Moore. I think it's going to help his draft stock come this time next year, because I think we talked about it. Some teams will look at him. Hey, he could play Sam linebacker for us. He could be a stand-up end. I think it's you're helping yourself and you're helping him. I also think too, let's assume that Trey Moore understands football conceptually, which is why they're able to do this. I think this is going to be a preview of what you're going to see from Colin Simmons in 2026. In other words, Trey Moore I think in a lot of ways, it's going to be the guinea pig for this staff. Is like, hey, let's do this for him. We'll keep Colin Simmons in his role. Just don't throw the kitchen sink at him yet. Just have him keep growing in his role, because now he's going to get more snaps going from a backup to a starter. So you can move Trey Moore around, give him all this, let Colin Simmons at least feel what that's like, and then you can just unleash hell with Colin Simmons in 2026. But I think overall, Rod, when we talk about weaponizing guys and that being the last step, I think PK is – I like the way you put that. Because I think PK is 4 or 5 steps along, where if you look at previous Texas defensive coordinators, I think that's where, like, specifically Manny Diaz and Todd Orlando tried to get, like, in step 2. And, like, you can't – the leap was too far to make. Just think about how they weaponize guys. And they had – look, those Texas defenses had guys you could weaponize. Oh, yeah. It just didn't click because, stuff got lost in translation. We don't have time to go back down that road, but I think PK's done a really good job of establishing the foundation and reaching out from there. And I think his personnel dictates when we talk about multiplicity, we talk about weaponizing guys. It's about dictating the terms of the game is what it boils down to. Think of it as, I know, for lack of a better term, PK's defensive style gets called bend but don't break. Now you can start dictating the terms of the game. Now you can be on the attack, that's the kind of defense Sark wants to play. He's talked about that right from one. And I think there were a lot of times you look at 21, 22, and even 23. I think there were times where he was frustrated where they weren't on the attack enough. And we know PK is not going to be a big blitz guy, but if you can create organic pressure just by getting Trey Moore or Anthony Hill, Colin Simmons, Jelani McDonald, the weapons that you do have, if you can create organic pressure just by getting those guys in favorable spots, think about it like you're dictating the terms on offense. What do you do when you move guys in motion, when you switch up formations? It's all about creating matchups. It's just that now the tables have turned, and as a defensive coordinator, your personnel is such that you can dictate matchups. You can dictate the terms of the game with your personnel. I think that's what it's all about. But I think Trey Moore right now, Rod, especially for Colin Simmons, is the guinea pig. Now, at linebacker at the second level, Anthony Hill's already there. You don't need to do any more experimenting with him. You can figure out, hey, here's the Anthony Hill package, and this is what we're going to do to unleash him. You've got Brad Spence also. Talked about Anthony Smith and how he can be kind of a dime linebacker for you. So, and it just goes back to think about when we talk about Sark being versatile on offense, right? Like he can use multiple formations, multiple personnel groups. It can be 11 personnel, 10 personnel, whatever. If you think about your edge room and your linebacker room with Colin Simmons, Trey Moore, Anthony Smith, Anthony Hill, Leonga Lafau, and Brad Spence, your options, Rod, really become endless in terms of the personnel you can put on the field. And then when you talk about getting into sub packages like your third down, your NASCAR package, okay, now what can you kick a guy like Ethan Burke inside? What do you do if you decide you like Zeno Mazzulo? Maybe you like Zena in some kind of package. So you have multiple different versions of a NASCAR package. So I just think that the stage of weaponizing guys, I think that's kind of the last stage of this group of defenders for PK of getting peak performance out of those guys.
No, I totally agree. I love the way you put it, Jeff, of almost Trey Moore being the guinea pig for Colin Simmons. Because Colin Simmons is somewhat undersized, right? For the premier prototypical edge rusher in the league. But as a boutique edge rusher, an outlier, he actually fits in really well. And I think for Trey Moore, what's Trey Moore, 6'3", 240, whatever he's supposed to be, somewhere around there. Trey Moore kind of fits in there too. Colin Simmons kind of fits in that Trey Moore mode as well. And now you can think about moving those guys around the formation. Decide if you can engineer matchup advantages for them. Rather, Colin Simmons right now, we all know, if you don't double team Colin Simmons and he gets a splash play, then that's on you as an offensive coordinator. It's on you. You screwed up because you left the best edge rusher potentially in college football one-on-one. And that's a huge problem. All right, you screwed up there. So I think they're anticipating that a lot of teams are going to double team Colin Simmons. And not only will they may have to move him around to try to find him matchup advantages, but also let's see how we can engineer matchup advantages elsewhere when they devote two guys, a tight end to chip, a running back to chip, whatever it may be, sliding protection toward Colin Simmons. and we get easy one-on-ones on the other side. So I'm just happy to hear that Colin Simmons is not that Colin Simmons, of course, he's going to be the number one guy, no doubt about that. But that Trey Moore is not going to get kind of lost in the shuffle. That they actually have a plan for him going forward. And honestly, to me, Jeff, this is just the last phase of it. I think ultimately what PK wanted was we got to make sure everybody knows how we stop the run. We stop the run, and you got to beat us elsewhere. We're going to take that away from you. And that has been ever since 2023. That's been consistent. It was the last 2 years, they stopped the run really well. They did it with, a first and a second round D tackle, and they've done it with kind of piecemeal money ball tackles, which they did last year. I think right now PK feels confident that he knows schematically how to stop the run. Now, the pass is a different monster altogether. It depends on the quarterback you're dealing with, depending on the weapons and the offensive line. And I think their plan for that is we got to create pressure, which is why they recruited the Stanford defensive end and didn't get them, but it's okay.
Yeah.
It shows you what their mindset is that pressure tops coverage. We can get coverage, but coverage ain't going to win the day. Pressure will win the day. We learned that watching the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I think now, because they were creating pressure in 2023 in 2024 with T'Vondre Sweat and with Byron Murphy in 2023 and 2024, they were able to convert that into sacks and splash plays. So I think now they feel like, all right, we know how to convert pressure. We know how to stop the run. The next thing for them is how do they limit really good quarterbacks in the passing game with their pressure and with their coverage. And I think ultimately they're going to decide on, hey, no, we need pressure to win the day.
Yeah.
Which is why I think ultimately, guys, which is why they want a guy like Trey Moore to be flexible. They want Colin Simmons to be flexible, even in the media availability. Remember, Sark mentions Anthony Hill. He just throws out Anthony Hill. It's a question and an answer about Trey Moore's versatility. He says, yeah, Anthony Hill's versatile too, which tells me there's a package where Anthony Hill's on the edge and potentially Trey Moore is at the linebacker spot. That's what I kind of heard. Like I said, I could be hearing things that ain't there. But when he just brought up Anthony Hill, unsolicited, I'm like, why are you talking about Anthony Hill? Nobody asked about Anthony Hill. He's like, yeah, Anthony Hill, he's position flex too. I think they're looking at every level of the defense and which guys can provide them flexibility, versatility. And I think they're looking at multiple guys at every level. D-line, it's probably Ethan Burke, Justice Terry, guys like Trey Moore, another guy like that. I think at the linebacker depth, it's a guy like Anthony Hill. Trey Moore could be now added to that. I'm with you. I love Ty Anthony Smith as a guy that can be in a hybrid role, as a guy that can really provide coverage depth for them. In the secondary, Jelani McDonald plays multiple positions. Jalen Gilbo's playing nickel and playing corner. They got a lot of guys that are cross-training there. I think ultimately the goal is, at the end of the day, to have multiple players at multiple levels of the defense that can play multiple positions. That truly is multiplicity, and that is a nightmare for any opposing offense.
I think when we look at as you were talking, Rob, the first thought that popped in my mind was, I think Sark looks back at the semifinal loss to Washington and doesn't want to be in that position again. You had a team good enough to win a national championship, but the inability to get pressure and for your pressure to get home, he probably looks at that as one of the things that cost them a national championship. It's a very short list of things that did, but Texas could have won a national championship if the roles are flipped and the 2020 Michael Penix and that Washington offense, if they face the 2024 Texas defense, there's no doubt in my mind Texas wins that game. Because Washington wouldn't be able to run the ball, number one, and number two, Texas had the kind of pass rushers to get home. I think when you look at PK and you look at his evolution and you look at that disastrous first year and what changed going into year two, obviously we give Gary Patterson a lot of credit.
Yep.
I think the guy that doesn't get enough credit, though, is Dan Quinn, because Sark had those two guys link up in the offseason because Sark worked for Dan Quinn in Atlanta. So Dan Quinn's a front guy, PK's a front guy. And I think you look at, we talk about what Dan Quinn did in Dallas with Micah Parsons. That's exactly what we're talking about PK doing right now with Trey Moore and potentially with Colin Simmons. It's the same thing. Dan Quinn goes to Washington. Had anybody really heard of Frankie Louvu before last season? Then the guy's an all-pro linebacker, has 8 sacks. He figured out how to take a guy like Dante Fowler, who he got off the scrap heap twice, and he ends up leading that defense that goes to the NFC Championship game, leading them with 10.5 sacks in the season. So Dan Quinn, Rod, might be the best in football, period, at taking guys that are undersized edge guys, kind of tweeners. Now we call them hybrids or position flex now. We used to call them tweeners. Dan Quinn is probably the best in football at taking those guys and be like, you see the flaw in that guy. I see the strength in something I can weaponize and something I can maximize. And like I said, I don't think anybody's better doing it than Dan Quinn. I think that's some of that Dan Quinn influence rubbing off on PK. It's like, look, I've got, but like you said, between Moore, Simmons, Spence, and Hill, specifically those 4 guys, look, I've got all these, 6'2" to 6'3", 230 to 240 pound bodies. If I can just get all these guys on the field at the same time or group them together, depending on the situation, they're not going to know where the rush is coming from. And especially in a year where you're in a transition year. You can't say Texas is in a rebuilding year, or even a reloading year at this point when you're competing for national championships, but you're in this kind of transition year with your interior D-line. It's a perfect year for you to be stacked at edge to where you've got all these different body types at edge and linebacker. Hey, let's just figure out how to maximize it. It's similar on offense, right? There may be years where you're loaded at wide receiver and you don't have as many good bodies that you trust at running back. All right, we're going to be a more 11 and 10 personnel team. On the flip side, you may be like 2022 Texas, where we got Xavier Worthy. We don't know if Jordan Whittington's going to be healthy. We have no idea what we got at receiver other than that, but we got these 2 stud running backs. Let's be more of a 2 running back team. Let's throw Keelan Robinson in there and run some diamond formation. So I just like that PK's looking at what he's got and he's trying to make the most of it. Not if I go the rest of my life or the rest of my time covering this team, Rod, where I don't have to hear a coordinator say, this is just the hand we were dealt. No, in the NIL era, now you can fix the hand. That doesn't have to be the hand you're dealt. So, and I think too, and this is the last thing I'll say on it, in an NIL era, I think coming off that loss to Washington, I think that, they went and got Trey Moore out of portal, even though that was before, but I think Sark knew that was coming. I think, they had the loss to Oklahoma, and I think he just looked at it and said, we've got the run game figured out. We've got our run defense figured out.
Yep.
If PK's not going to blitz, then we need to allocate our NIL funds and allocate our resources to getting the best possible pass rushers we can in the market, be that high school edge guys, portal edge guys, high school linebackers, portal linebackers. They are doubling down, tripling down. That was what the David Bailey move was all about, to go back to one of your original points.
Yeah.
It's just doubling down on the strength and making sure, what, we've got a really good pass rush. If we get David Bailey, there's no question you have the best pass rush in the country.
I'm with you, Jeff. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think if I had to kind of project what the tendencies Texas will have on defense next year, they won't blitz more. They won't. I think they'll still rely on the organic pass rush to get there. That's why they wanted the Stanford pass rusher, so they can just kind of overwhelm teams. All right, being able to throw out different pass rushers. I was listening to a coaching clinic from Larry Johnson, the Ohio State defensive lineman, who's known as one of the great. He's like the coach Akina of defensive linemen, respected worldwide for his resume. And he said, I think it's overblown when teams talk about being multiple on defense. He said, because all I need is one defensive end that can stand up and be a linebacker and also be a 2-point defensive end. And I can go from being a 3-4 to a 4-3. He said, literally, I can go from being a 3-man front to a 4-man front to a 6-man front, all with one guy that's versatile. I feel like Texas wants that one guy every year.
Yeah.
That can make them, we can be a 3. We can be a 3 down front. Or we can be a 4 down front. Or we can be a 5 down, 6 down, depending on what you want to do. We have those guys. I feel like Texas wants that malleability. And the way he broke it down, which is really simple, he's like, no, if I stand that guy up, we're 3 down front. If I put that guy down in 2-point stance, we're 4 down front. And I think Texas wants that malleability. And they have the type of athletes, Colin Simmons, Trey Moore, I mean, look at that from the freaks that they're recruiting here in the 2025 and 2026 classes, 27 classes too. They'll have that ability. So I think Texas wants to be multiple. They want to be multiple, and Trey Moore is the latest experiment in that. Listen, Jalen Gilbo is the latest experiment in the secondary. Right? Jay Barron went from nickel to corner, did it very successfully. I think now Jalen Gilbo's training at the corner. They want that to be another potential position flex for them. I've said it before. You heard me say it, Jeff. The future of football is positionless football.
Yep.
You're going to try to recruit as many freak athletes you can that can play on more than one level or that can play more than one position. I think Texas now, look at the guys they're recruiting. They have a lot of guys like that they're recruiting in the latest recruiting classes. And I think that's where they're going. I got a quote from Sark from 2022. So to put it all into perspective, this is what he said. All right. He said, we've been talking for a couple of years now about wanting to be tighter in coverage and play a style of defense where you're tight and confident in coverage. You can be aggressive at the line of scrimmage to get to the quarterback. So all these players we recruited, he said, they all have to have coverage, the ability to play man coverage, no matter whether they ended up at safety, star, or corner. I think that's ultimately what he wants. Guys who can play man at any position, but guys who can play multiple positions.
I think
it's taking them a little while to get there, but I think now they might be close. They might be right there on the precipice of it.
It's at the end of the day, Rod, I know this sounds simple, but this is really where I think it crystallizes for me. At the end of the day, it's about getting your best 11 on the field.
Yep.
In any situation. And I think it's similar to, you look at offense right now. I think one of the more understated, underrated things in that press conference on Tuesday, Sark talking about Nick Brooks started out as the back. Keep in mind, Nick Brooks is a true freshman, early enrollee. He starts out as the backup left tackle to Trevor Gooseby. Now he's the right tackle. He's over at right tackle competing with Brandon Baker and Andre Kojo. So that tells you when they look at their top 8 or 9, they think Nick Brooks is in there in some way, shape, or form. Now they're letting him work both sides to say, hey, if he's got to play, he at least understands what to do at left tackle or right tackle, because if he needs to go in at right tackle, obviously you'd put him in there and let him go. But if something were to happen to Gooseby, maybe Nick Brooks is the next best option, and you still want him to know left tackle. Nate Kibble at guard, same thing. Cole Hudson's been a starter at guard. Now he's moving to center. So I think the offensive line, we talked about it, right? Like offensive line and the secondary are kind of the same in that the depth chart is almost irrelevant. You may be the backup safety. You may not ever see the field, because if the starting safety in front of you gets hurt, they may decide, nope, our nickel is our next best safety. We'll put him there. We'll take our number 3 or 4 corner. We'll put him at the nickel because now we still got our best 11 on the field. Or in a hypothetical world, hey, maybe depending on the opponent, they just decide, you know what, we'll just go 40 personnel and put Ty Anthony Smith on the field, because now we've got our 4 best defensive backs available and we've got our best 11 because Ty Anthony Smith is still one of those guys. So there's multiple ways you can do it. But to me, it just boils down to how do you get your best 11 on the field? And I'll say this too. We've seen Rod Texas have good natural pass rushers, right? Yeah. Through these lean years, the lean years that preceded this run, where you're talking about Sam Acho, Alex Okafor, Jackson Jeffcoat, Joseph Osai, guys that were all-American type guys that played in the NFL for a long time. The difference is, to your point, and I hope that's what all the Longhorn fans listening to this and watching this hone in on, the athleticism. These guys that they're recruiting now are, with all due respect to those guys, and I love AO and some of the guys I just mentioned, these guys are superior athletes. They are truly multi-positional athletes. So you're just up in the ante and saying, being a natural pass rusher isn't good enough. We need you to be one of our best athletes on the field. Yep.
And to your point, to kind of put the bow on it, because you just broke it down there, I think, very eloquently and articulately. It's how do you get your best 5 on the field? And I think that's what they're trying to figure out offensively on the offensive line. And on the defense, I know Coach Aquino. personally, I know his goal is to get the best 5 on the field. Now, that may be too deep at corner. Your second string corner, maybe one of your best 5. Your second string safety, maybe one of your best 5. Your second string star, nickel, maybe one of your best 5. He's going to try to get the best 5 on the field, which is why cross training is so important. Yeah. And position flex is so important for the secondary, especially with Coach Aquino, because he's going to make sure, listen, if I got to get my best 5 on the field, maybe that means Jelani McDonald is our nickel, or maybe that means he's our safety. Maybe that means Gilbo's the nickel or the corner. We don't know, but the cross training gives us flexibility and options for that. And I've heard Sark in that availability, that media availability, he mentioned, you know what, we may have to just bring in our best 5. Who are our best 5 offensive linemen in what best circumstance, right? Is that run blocking, pass blocking? So I can't wait who they figure out who their best 5 are, because you're right. Secondary and offensive line, strange to say they're very connected in that way, but they are. Both offense and defense are trying to figure out who are my best 5 guys in the secondary and the best 5 on the offensive line, because that's modern football. You're going to play 5 guys, you're going to play 5 DBs, and you're going to play 5 offensive linemen. Who are your best 5? You got to figure that out.
The guys that will thrive in the modern game, no matter what position you play, are the guys that can understand football conceptually and take it to the field. The days of I am a right guard and this is my job, this is my position. Nope, it's done. The days of I am an X receiver and you may have a role somewhere, but it ain't gonna be playing wide receiver for Sark, because you got to learn all the positions.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, you're right about that. That's a good point about receiver. I didn't bring that up, but you're right. I think just that learning the game conceptually, which is why people want to know why Coach Aquino is such a great DB coach. He teaches the game conceptually, period. Like that's how I teach it to you guys. That's how I analyze it. That's how he teaches it. And I think that's what gives guys the ability to play multiple positions, because you understand the game in a holistic, macro sense.
Yeah.
As opposed to on the individual specific level. All right. Enough football theory for today. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. Let me thank our sponsor, Laura Baker. We appreciate Laura Baker and her team for being a part of our team here at On Texas Football. Laura Baker, the accomplished Austin realtor, can handle all of your real estate needs in the Austin area. Laura is not only a diehard Longhorn fan, but a longtime Austin real estate expert. Please give her a shout today if you have any concerns or regards concerning Longhorn real estate in Longhorn area. 512-784-0505. That's 512-784-0505. Reach out to Laura Baker and her team if you have any questions or concerns about real estate in the Austin area. And we appreciate her for sponsoring Football Theory once again. Thank you, Jeff, for all of your expertise and all of your knowledge. We appreciate it. I leave here a smarter football theorist as a result. Thank you to Matthew behind the scenes as well. And thank you to all of you guys out there for watching and for listening. And for Jeff and for Matthew, I'm Lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers, and for Laura Baker as well. Until next time, hook 'em horns.